Well, you can't. I mean, look, if everybody can't make it, then you don't want to warn people because then you're going to have food shortages now. You're going to have the collapse coming early, and you're going to have less time to prepare if you are the government, if you are the elite, whatever, if that's what's happening. It's quite grim. Obviously, we're on a we're out on a limb because we built the civilization. We got almost 8 billion people on the planet. We have this untenable way of growing food and maintaining people. We've exhausted all the soils. Um, and now we're entering into this period where countries are starting to hoard food, hoard fuel, starting to fight over land, over territory, preparing for war.
Sell in May and go away. Crash is king. As the sell-off in the stock market has crushed Americans' IRAs and 401ks. Morgan Stanley says all stocks inside the index are likely to see a steep downward decline. Deutsche Bank and Citi are predicting a major recession. Barron's and Lawrence Lepard betting that gold hits 3,000 in the next 2 years. Russia, Saudi Arabia, and China are looking to diversify out of U.S. dollar-denominated assets. And now Russia demanding payment for natural gas in rubles. So could this spell the end of the U.S. dollar as the global reserve currency? Call the Patriot Gold Group today before it's too late. Patriot Gold Group has the no fee for life IRA where your IRA or 401k can be in physical gold and silver, and you may be eligible for the no fee for life IRA on qualifying rollovers. Call 1-800-356-4470 for a free investor guide today. And with the knowledge that Patriot Gold Group is Consumer Affairs' top-rated IRA gold dealer from 2016 to present, click on that link in the description box below. And now on with the video. And good afternoon, everyone. Today I have with me Jeffrey Nyquist. We've had a couple interviews before, and today we really wanted to talk about what's going on in China. Why are they cutting the wheat early? And then also some geopolitics on the food end of things coming out. We're getting some solid numbers around the world right now of what the first projected losses would be, and those will tick up. So Jeffrey, thanks for joining me. And as we were on the call earlier, we were talking about war preparations and what's happening with North Korea and China right now.
Mm-hmm.
So if you want to take the knees out of a country, stop the fertilizer, they're going to stop the corn first and the sorghum because they feed too heavy. And then you can see what corn does. And our pipelines in America have magically been cut off. Wait a second. It seems like it's all coordinated globally. I just can't believe all this is happening just for those guys over there. It seems like it's a global unified effort to make it all happen and make it look like it's organic. And it seems like everybody's on the same page because they all have the same information on the intensity of the cycle. Our civilization can't be salvaged at this point. So it's going to be demolished.
So let me ask you, what is exactly do you think is going to happen in October of 2024? What do you see coming?
Well, there'll be a second electromagnetic field in our solar system with the combination of Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune combining with their toroid field, looping into a wider, larger field. Now, if you're counting from the outer planets inward, like you referenced there, Jupiter, Mars, Earth. So we'll be 2 planets away from that new magnetic field. Now, it's not going to be incredibly strong as the sun is, but it's a second magnetic field in the solar system here. So then at the same time, we'll have the sun. It'll be stepping down. We're coming into that point where it's already at the solar maximum, rolling down. It's projected to go into a grand solar minimum solar cycle 26 anyway. Even NASA and European Space Agency are talking about, incredibly low solar activity, the lowest in 400 years. So we're going to be looping between 2 magnetic fields, our Earth is, in October of 2024. So how's the human perception going to change during that time, being electromagnetic ourselves? And then truly, what are the changes on our planet going to be? What are we going to see?
So going into the winter from October 2024, we're going to see really low temperatures.
Well, it'd be more electromagnetic effects where electrical discharges in the sky and plasma events. We're going to see canyon wall petroglyphs come to life. beginning at that time.
You
That's
mean
the beginning of it. Yeah, we're truly in earnest
these
when that second magnetic field lines up. Yeah.
super lightning storms?
Oh, electrical discharge beyond, like literally biblical discharge, ground to sky. Because what happens, our Earth is going to be overcharged at that point, and that potential between the two, that needs to fill somehow. Our Earth is going to send that electric current out. Probably, here's my prediction too. The Hall currents that are outbound flows between, say, 20 degrees north and 45 north or south, those two belts of our planet, those
Wait, okay,
contain the
say that
Hall.
again. 25, say
No,
that again.
20 degrees north latitude to about 45 degrees north latitude. And then in the southern hemisphere, it'd be 20 degrees southern latitude to 20 or 45 degrees.
So I think I'm at 46 degrees.
Plus or minus. Okay,
Plus or minus.
We'll include you because we like you. You get the electromagnetic plasma discharges too. You bonus.
I was hoping I was outside of it.
And those are the outbound flow currents versus what we know as the field aligned currents that roll in on the North Pole or the South Pole.
Now, are we talking about storms that happen when like clouds come over and there's a lightning storm and it's just worse? Or what are we talking about?
Yeah, it's not going to be a thunderstorm or like you're saying, to be an electrical storm.
Which is caused by, do you get a cloud cover? Do you need cloud cover for that?
I'm going to say, yeah. Well, you got to look at that. Clouds are also electrically induced. So are tornadoes. So are hurricanes. Right. Everything's electrical. So let me tell you, I'm going to tell you a little something here. I was doing some consulting, and this has been almost a year now. So come on. All right. So what I was doing was looking where electrical disturbances were happening in the atmosphere over and over again, whether you were seeing blue jets, red sprites, or elves. And that's an outbound current flow. Like some of those elves, you can actually see the ring of the electrical, or I should say magnetic field line coming out. So I started to look at those in depth and really, so I lined up one place, the Volga region of Russia and Oblast was the area.
Okay.
And I was saying, look at oats there, long on oats, because regional oat production, it's the largest amount of oat production in Russia occurs in that region. And if it's disrupted on local weather patterns, because you got to think locally, if there's a higher ionized potential in the atmosphere, there's going to be more cloud cover. Weather patterns are going to shift. You know, it's higher electric frequency coming out of there. So things are going to be electrically different there. Storms are going to change course around it. Cloud cells are going to build there. Discharges.
It's already affecting crop production because temperatures and because there's too much rain or not enough rain.
Well, yeah, when you start to move the jet streams in the cloud cells, and then you have cloud cells bunching on top of themselves, trying to find new areas in the atmosphere or the new flow in the atmosphere. Think of it as a river. Like if two rivers collide together, you're going to see it. The water is going to bunch up. There's going to be turbidity. There's going to be rock formations, new like land banks. There'll be landslides. There'll be all kinds of things happening along that riverbank. Well, think it now, take it into the atmosphere and the same thing happening. So then when you have a year's worth of rain in 2 hours, well, that might be where the two rivers are coming together and making that sort of, you know, almost surfable wave within there. You know, you can take it either dense water medium on the earth to explain two rivers crashing together or two streams, or you can take it higher in the atmosphere and do the same exact representations of it. But then you need to add in the jet streams too. And then you need to add in the increasing electrical outbound flow of current. And then you wish that all together, and then you see what happens in certain regions. And then you look back in history books and see where, like in Poland, perfect example. You know, I'm starting to like map out using GIS software, these electrical disturbances across the planet with outbound flows that's going to affect regional weather patterns, which will affect crops directly under there. And then I'm getting a good forecast of where places are going to be lost first. Poland's going to be another one. Those regions right there, I'm calling right now, massive crop losses. Poland, Czech Republic, and Oblast, and the Volga region of Russia. Based on electrical disturbance, changing the weather patterns far more than what's happening just in a global sense. So when I was talking about the cloud cells and jet streams, okay, that's an overall global thing that's happening. Intertropical convergence zone moving, et cetera. That's a global phenomenon. What I'm talking about, very, very pinpoint, precise, laser precise regions that grow crops that are affected by outbound current flow.
Interesting.
So talking about crop losses being electrically induced, see, this is the cycle that the elitists are in on. Understand it. governments understand it. And once you get a very, even a basic understanding of when the current is flowing out, it's going to change clouds and how much rain is there. It could either dry it out or make it wet, both. But whatever's happening, think of it as a cylinder coming out of the earth. And whatever is around that cylinder is going to get bounced north or south, east or west out of its normal flowing position.
There's this peculiar passage out of Plato where Solon is talking to the priests in Sais in Egypt. That was the capital of Egypt at the time. And they were talking about this kind of an event, although they described it, they used metaphors that the earth was scorched by Apollo. They described, well, it was really bizarre because the priest, when he described it, he said, well, the people in the lowlands will be fine. It's the people in the highlands that get, basically fried, as if there was like a super lightning storm that struck the highlands. But it's
radiation that went, if you're looking at UV, A, B, and C radiation. So perhaps there was a magnetic field anomaly at that point that went so low that UVC was able to hit. If UVC hit the top of the Himalayan mountains, it wouldn't affect you down there. But if it reached ground level, we'd all be fried. There's been some recent UVB readings that have hit ground level. So it makes sense with what you said, because a lot of those really heavy radiation that would affect you as a human being are going to be at higher latitudes. They're not going to reach what is considered sea level. So that makes perfect sense as what, if there was like that, yeah, I could see something like that would scorch the mountaintops, but down low, you would be okay.
Yeah. And the priest made the point that when, there were giant rocks in the heavens that would fall to the ocean, strike them and displace the water onto the land, causing flooding, then the people in the lowlands were in danger. But when this other thing happened, the people in the highlands were in danger. It was kind of very interesting. And of course, a lot of people paying attention to catastrophic events, they didn't know about electromagnetism, in antiquity. At least they didn't use our terminology in talking about it.
They use Zeus and the thunderbolts to represent
right, or talk about
cometary bombardment or electrical bombardment. It was all represented in the heavens through all the stories we know. They covered all the bases.
Right. Yeah, they were using stories metaphorically to describe events. This is the thing in Hamlet's Mill, is that they realized that there was also mathematical allusions in these stories, references to the equinoxes and to different geological points on the map, or geographical points on the map. In terms of what you're describing, what are we going to experience on the ground? I mean, what is it going to be like? Are these events going to outright kill a lot of people, or is it just the destruction of the food supply that's going to kill people?
That's an unknown. I mean, you got to look through chapters of history. But what I can for certain say is our planting and growing seasons are being disrupted globally across all continents. It's not a localized thing. It's a planetary magnetic field thing. And they call it polar wander. And if you want to take a look at it, there's people far better versed than myself. Go over to Ben Davidson at Suspicious Observers and check out their catastrophism series and look at where they sit right now in magnetic reversal news. And there's a lot of quality info about where our magnetic field is declining to in such a rapid fashion that, they're literally talking about not geopole shift in terms of the actual earth tipping, but magnetic anomalies and shifts. So the prediction was that the North Pole is going to run somewhere into the middle of the Indian Ocean, west off of Indonesia, and the Southern Pole will also meet somewhere in there, and then whoosh, it will reverse. We're talking about north-south orientation magnetically, not geophysically. So there's a huge amount of information on, just things that were thought impossible in terms of how quickly it could decline the magnetic field is now in real time. And it's baffling. They're even the scientists, quote unquote, are baffled by all these new discoveries on how fast it declined. But if you look through history, they talk about it happening just so fast. Again and again, the ancients come back to teach us. We seem to be the newbies on the block. The ancients have lived it several times, left us the legends, the stories, the signs to look for, signs in the skies, animal behaviors, etc. when we come into these magnetic events. And we're in one right now. So, you start to couple all this together. If I was a government, I certainly would be trying to keep my government together too. I'd be preparing for it, and really probably wouldn't tell the citizens, because they'll just be a bunch of boneheads out on the street causing problems before the real problem.
Panic, loss of law and order.
Oh yeah, nobody
hoarding.
would obey the rule of law. Are you kidding me? It would be chaos. You'd have to build a fort around your thing, and everybody up on the walls trying to protect your stuff well before what's about to happen. It's in play right now.
It's interesting, even a police state like the Soviet Union, when the German armies were closing on Moscow in late November, early December 1941, there were riots. There was complete collapse of civil order in Moscow. People don't realize this. And the only thing that saved the city was the temperatures dropped to 40 degrees below zero. The German army had to bug out of there because their guns didn't work, their cannons didn't work, the temperatures destroyed their ability to use fuel, and it was so low it was affecting the petrol in the tanks They had to abandon things, and basically just had to get out of there because the temperatures fell so drastically. 60,000 German soldiers suffered severe frostbite. People had their eyelids frozen right off, so they lost their sight. People died defecating because it was so cold. If you didn't do it right, you'd die almost instantaneously from the effects.
Yeah, you're painting a crazy picture of that one.
Crazy picture, yes. The order of the frozen meat was the medal that the Wehrmacht struck for those that suffered that winter from the frostbite. And
can you imagine trying to live through that again? If we go out off the system of centralized delivery of fuels and electricity, and you really have to provide your own heat and wood source or coal or whatever you're going to burn in your house to stay warm through that type of temperature, most of Europe won't survive.
Yeah. Of course, Europe hasn't experienced those kind of temperatures since the Ice Age, and but they got
the ocean to keep them warm.
Right? Keep them warm. But in terms of the changing of the climate, could we talk about a mini ice age? Could we suddenly start experiencing those low temperatures here in North America and in Europe, which is normally warmer? Could we start to experience these transarctic temperatures? Yeah.
Well, maybe not transarctic, but I did an interview several years ago with a researcher. His name is David Dilley, Dilley. And he talks about a 9-year pulse of meltwater going under the Arctic, under the sea ice. And it is going to be a warm cycle or a cool water cycle with more melt into it. So that water is not as saline, it freezes faster, it causes the ice cap to freeze faster. But on the inverse, it's more saline on these 9-year cycles. It pulses under and then out of the Arctic Circle. Well, in all of his forecasts going back with the 9-year cycle, we were coming into a cold water, less saline pulse right now. So things are going to start freezing faster, and he predicts massive, unbelievable record cold coming up over these starting now, this winter, through the next 9 years. Are going to be unbelievable, record-breaking cold, because he does solar cycles, moon cycles, lunar cycles, in addition to what we're seeing with the AMOC, which is the overturning oscillation in the Atlantic, and then how that affects the pulse waters, more saline, less saline, going up into the Arctic, the ice melting there, that's pushing in more, like I say, it's reducing the salinity of the water that's being pushed under there. He was looking at what are the ice arcs last year? The ice arcs are between Greenland and Newfoundland there, and Nunavut Island, up if you get further up toward the Arctic Circle, that the ice, when it's melting, usually can flow pretty freely out of that area. But for the last 2 years, it's jammed up in there, and they call it ice arc, where it's arcing and then causing a dam behind it. So it's delaying a lot of the melting after the freeze. And then what has happened is it's so backed up there that once it does break free, it sends a huge amount of icebergs, which we've seen those years in a row where shipping had to pull a couple hundred miles south to avoid the icebergs coming out of there. So we're starting to see, more things happening on the natural side that show there's changes as well happening in these last 2 years. Now, not as much research has been done since the COVID because you weren't allowed to travel to a lot of countries. So it seems that if instrumentation was there, they could still maintain it and get readings, but to put out new instrumentation and take new cores and get people up there to actually visibly, catalog what they're seeing, and the changes kind of got locked in time, but now they're going back again this year because COVID's over, or at least more free for travel.
Right.
But David Dilley's work, you got to check out his stuff. And David, shout out. Thanks for the interview many years ago. I do remember what you told me. And it's going to get chilly across Europe because of that. Now, not subarctic temperatures like affect Russia, but far colder than the normal. And even just that alone, people that don't have access to heating in their homes would not make it through the winter. I mean, without that centralized delivery of your energy into a building in northerly parts of Europe, it's just not going to happen. It's going to be tumultuous, and you'll see why people have moved through history. Population migration accompanies the cold and the non-growing of food because they need to go to better areas, warmer areas that could at least produce food and have an economy so they can participate in that.
So given that that certain people now, how do you suppose this hasn't gotten out to the general public from government researches, that they have been able to hold on to the secret so tightly? I mean, how are they able? They can't seem to hold on to other secret information. How do you suppose they're keeping all this secret if they do indeed know? And who is it that knows? Is it the presidents? Is it people in the bureaucracies, the scientific bureaucracy? How is this handled, do you think?
Well, it's not this great giant secret that everybody is, in a corner of a room to don't tell anybody. There's been plenty of information, thousands and thousands and tens of thousands of peer-reviewed research papers get put out every year. But A, who has the time? And B, when you start to dissect them and then you speak like I do, hey, it's the sun, it's not you, it's not CO2, then suddenly removed from reach of people. And if they do that enough and then they throw out alternative narratives like AGW, global warming, it's self-fulfilling, because every time you want to have the conversation, you're shut down by everybody who's been brainwashed for 40 years about global warming. So it's all out there, except the way that the narrative was constructed stops all conversation about anything other than it's you. And there's a small amount of people who understand what's going on and these changes on the cycles, but the general populace doesn't. I bet less than 1% of the full general populace understands the cycles we're in right now. I'd say a full 5-6% understand that something's really changed with food production, maybe 7, but we're not even at a full 10% of the full globe understanding what's going on yet. But we will coming up in July and August when they do the crop tours. And oh my, by when we come into October of this year for the harvest season, there'll be well over half the planet that will get it at that point. We've been lied to. And then what?
So you think the real food shortages are coming in October then?
Well, the beginning of them.
The beginning of them. So you think that we'll kind of get through the early summer months without people really catching on?
Those involved in futures markets, economic news, ag biz, delivery, supply chains, those in the railroads, yeah, futures delivery, because people at the grain mills, they'll all get it. But I mean, again, that's such a small microcosm of business, and who's going to listen to them except other people in business? Because everybody's too busy watching Netflix or playing their video games or whatever. They don't care that a grain operator just said, I cannot believe we only got 10% of what we normally get over the last 80 years. This is going to be a catastrophe. And they're like, well, my supermarket still has food. It's okay. Bye. And that's the attitude you get predominantly across all spheres of society. Very few people want to know. And if they do know, they'd rather prefer not to know because it's too difficult to deal with.
Wow.
Too bad. You're going to have to deal with it anyway this year. So welcome to the club.
Welcome to the club. And so you will have other systems breaking down, obviously, when this happens.
Which ones do you think they'll be? Because I'm always trying to glean Others' opinions. Okay, we understand food, and then when food breaks down, the economy breaks down, rule of law breaks down. Okay, and then what?
Well, you have feudalism. Whenever these things break down, you have local relationships and local armed people that end up in control of everything. This is what happened with the fall of the Roman Empire. It was local armed groups that took over for the legions in defending local communities and so forth. So this is what you normally have happen. And of course, those armed groups then distribute the food and decide who eats and who doesn't. And it's a matter of fealty, a matter of loyalty. And if you are loyal to the right people with the guns, then you will be fed. You will be part of the system. If you're not, you're pushed out. You don't have a place. That's just kind of how feudalism worked. There's some interesting books about the fall of the Roman Empire. By the way, we know more about it than we ever have before because of archaeological things and things that have been discovered. Just to describe, the trade collapsed, and people don't realize a basic product was olive oil that everybody used. It was very important, but it was not grown in places. So you have a place like Lyon, France, where they were waiting after the collapse of the empire for the olive oil shipment, the caravan to come with the olive oil from the port down south, and it didn't come. Well, maybe next year, not next year, year after year. Well, we remember it came once, and now suddenly they don't have a product that their local economy was dependent on.
Reminds me of the islands where what was that cult in the World War II where the airplanes would drop supplies and then
the cargo cult.
Cargo cult, that's it. If I had something similar,
cult.
But in reverse. Well, imagine those first couple of years when the planes stopped coming.
Mm-hmm.
For the cargo cult, the same thing. The olive oil shipments quit coming, the caravans quit coming. The salt caravans disappeared across the Ghana Empire in Northern Africa, and the salt route ceased that first couple of years. People would have been, the salt's not coming anymore. Mm-hmm. Same with that. The cargo planes aren't coming anymore, or the olive oil shipments aren't coming anymore. So imagine a world where we look back and say the oil deliveries aren't coming any longer.
Right. Yeah.
As oil's being shut off, and I am going to say, I keep reading these articles again and again about diesel shortages poised for the Southeast U.S. and the eastern part of the U.S. Because see, as I look at it in a turning fashion, almost all the duress and problems with supply chain shortages, like problems in the cities, the riots, has all been directed out toward over the Mississippi River going west. But what I see right now is everything's being directed this way. The East is getting it next, and we're starting to with the diesel shortages starting right now. And I want to say right now, you got to see the amount of, commercial drivers within companies that are getting messaging going, fill up your rigs right now. They're going to run out in just a few days.
Yeah. Well, that implies food shortages coming next month.
If you're not prepared.
Mm-hmm.
But by this point, you should be. If you didn't get the message by now, I'm just sorry. You're never going to get it. And, don't come knocking on my door because you didn't get the messaging after millions of people have been asking and telling you for 2 years now. If COVID didn't wake you up, then I'm sorry, maybe your cognitive skills are in decline or not there at all. But if you haven't seen what happened during that period of time, and if you didn't get a little extra food because of what happened in COVID, or store some extra fuel, or have a network of people, or got some seeds to grow your garden during those 2 years when everything started to shut down, and you're still not getting it, then you're never going to get it. And it's far too late. We got less than 6 months before we're going into a global famine here. And I don't know, not everybody's meant to live through this, and it will be decided who did or didn't. And perhaps that's in a weird, twisted way. I've heard this from the elite speak about it a few times, that's the way they choose, or who is chosen. There's no you get to go next. It's those who survive these times are the ones that should lead those after the collapse and the reassemblance. Because if you were too stupid to make it through this time, then you sure have no right to be telling anybody or making legislation or any types of law enforcement or anything moving forward to the next world that we're entering. You got no right to even be there or even have one iota of what to say goes on. If you don't even have stored food right now, you're not going to make it. Mm-hmm. And that's the way they're looking at it. It's just such a twisted and bizarre thing. I think I would warn people myself, but I'm in the reality of it now, just looking around going, nah, it's just,
Well, you can't. I mean, look, if everybody can't make it, then you don't want to warn people because then you're going to have food shortages now. You're going to have the collapse coming early, and you're going to have less time to prepare if you are the government, if you are the elite, whatever, if that's what's happening. It's quite grim. Obviously, we're on a we're out on a limb because we built this civilization. We got almost 8 billion people on the planet. We have this untenable way of growing food and maintaining people. We've exhausted all the soils. And now we're entering to this period where countries are starting to hoard food, hoard fuel, starting to fight over land, over territory, preparing for war. It looks like World War time. For my thing is politics and war and studying that, and it does look like China, North Korea, Russia, and maybe their friends in Iran and other places are on board with doing something, being proactive, as you can say, to secure what it is they, feel they need to look after themselves. And that is really scary.
well, for me, it's just a history book repeating right now. I mean, you and I, we both could look back in different epochs of history and the exact same things happened.
Mm-hmm.
Allegiances and alliances were built.
Interesting.
But that purge from World War I was so startling. I just looked at that, just complete waste of humanity. And when I look at it, I really looked at it as just like a sorrowful waste. But it removed so much of the male population out of Europe at that time.
Well, 20 million people, basically.
Yeah, it was sickening to look back in that chapter of history, especially that the trenches. And it was where did the trenches go from like the English Channel all the way through France, all the way down to like Switzerland or the border of Italy? Like what?
Well, the front lines kept moving. They kept digging trenches at different places. But yeah, warfare was big artillery guns and infantry. The cavalry was no good. They'd have to dismount. You couldn't do a cavalry charge into machine guns. So the cavalry they were fast infantry. They just dismount light infantry and go into the trenches. So everybody was stuck in there because you had to take cover from the artillery and the machine guns and the heavy rifle fire, snipers and stuff, right? So it wasn't until they developed tanks and armor, flamethrowers, infiltration tactics the Germans developed, they were able to get war mobile again, which World War II then was a different kind of war because of that. But I think that if you look at history, the idea that people control history, there's a tremendous limits to human wisdom and human ability to control. And I think that even in social systems, they are too intellectually limited, the leaders are, and the way the system works to really be able to cope with situations like this. The fact is that you have to know too much, and human systems not only are fragile, but they literally don't know. Like the story of the FSB letters, they don't communicate correctly to their own people. What this FSB guy was saying was that if you gave the wrong answer, they wanted you to say that Russia could economically survive if the West had been destroyed by a bunch of meteor strikes. And if you didn't say it, you got called in for questioning. So pretty much people learned pretty early, this is what they want us to conclude. So they concluded that Russia could survive economically without the West being there. And he said, it's not true. We would collapse within 2 months if we were totally cut off. This is what he said in the letters. So it's very interesting. The people upstairs, they don't really listen. They never have listened to the people from below, maybe in some systems more or less. But and then they have their idea of how to organize things. And more often than not, they collapse when they try to organize things that way, because our civilization is built by the market. And the market is everybody coming together voluntarily and trading and doing, because a real economic knowledge is decentralized. It belongs to you, it belongs to me. And the market is where these prices go up and down without the government controlling them, that tells you what we need and what is lacking. And without those mechanisms, the government trying to direct it, it just gets fouled up. And if people are going to die of starvation, if things are going to collapse, that's going to occur. And there's nothing they can do about it really, except maybe make it worse which is usually what governments do when they try to direct these things. That's just the perspective of a political sociologist or political economy. But
yeah, my perspective is we are on a farm, and different farming techniques are used in things called nations. And I look at it like that because from on high, it seems that where you're talking about the directives coming down are always used to control, crush, reduce humanity into a certain fashion to continue to milk the labor. And it's been like that since time immemorial, at least the last 3,000 years. So for me, it seems the echelons going to the very top are using the earth as a farm for labor and whatever our output could be, whether that be agriculture or minerals, IT, whatever now in the modern age. But think about the different kind of farming techniques. We call that politics, and the different ways to get the output, whether it be through the whip or whether it be through perceived freedom. You know, that's the way I'm looking at it. We're on a farm here.
mm-hmm. Well, freedom always produces more. Slavery always produces less. That's just what we've learned from history, from watching. And if people want to take advantage and get more control, if you have more criminal things, I think there is a cultural and economic decline, an intellectual decline in the West. You look at the leaders today. Are they as smart as the leaders of 100 years ago, or especially 150 or 200 years ago? I think they're not as well educated. They're not as knowledgeable. They're not as wise, and they're not as good as people go. They're not as honorable. And so I think that plays into it too.
Unless that's the illusion we were given, because you look back through history and you just wonder, really, how was history? Because trying to search these cycles back through history, there's a lot of anomalies and missing pieces and chapters that seem to sandwich together or have a big wedge between them where there was just this gap. And then it picks back up again. Are you really, there was an 800-year gap, and then that's the last thing we heard. And then 800 years later, boom, they pop back up like a gopher sticking their head out of the sand. Like, really, you know, it's riddled with inconsistencies. It's riddled with missing pieces. It's riddled with double speak of the same events. But again, victories, or what is it? History is written by the victors. So I could see a lot of that happening through several thousand years of translations and retranslations. And yeah. We're ready for another cycle. So here we go. Hold on. Take a deep breath. Waves really big this time.
Yeah. Well, I hope it's not as bad as it sounds. October 2024, huh? Wow. All right.
Well, we got to get through this October 1st. Yeah, I would be super excited to get to October of 2024 to see the light show in the sky. But I'll take this first October as a blessing to get through into next year.
Yeah, certainly it will. Well, all right. Very good.
All right. And thanks for staying with us for the chat here. Hope you got something out of it that can help you prepare. And again,
oh, yeah, definitely. And my listeners are going to be intrigued. I think this is one of the most interesting conversations. This is the most interesting one we've had so far. And a lot to think about. A lot to think about.
It is. And I'll put all the links in the description box below so you can chase down and then head over to Jeffrey's blog there and check out the articles and information he's putting up. And then also some of the slides and graphics I'll include here that you can also chase down yourself to do more research. Because I want you to do more research. I'm just saying some points. Your job is to disprove it or go with it or use it the way you want to. That's all I'm saying. You need to do your own research. So continue from here and the points that Jeffrey and I had put out today. So anyway, thanks for watching. Jeff, any last thoughts or?
No, I am I'm just amazed, and I'm very concerned about the stuff on China and North Korea. These very weird moves. These are very ominous, and that's I guess I'll leave it at that.
Well, we do have this weekend to prepare, so Saturday, Sunday cometh for many who are unprepared. You need to get something prepared. Anyway, bye for now.